this is the best day. It's baking day. It's the day we get to actually bake the bread and have the result of all our hard work, which was really just a lot of fun. So here is our dough that we had put in the fridge yesterday. We're gonna bake both of our loaves, and that'll give me the opportunity to show you the different results that you get by using these different types of baking devices with a lid. Oh boy. So cast iron versus stainless steel. If you have a baking, what is the word? I don't know, you know, thing, Dutch oven with a lid that's enamel, that is a great way to go. Enamel doesn't tend to make the bottom of your loaf burn or get too dark. So enamel's wonderful. These will tend to get the bottom of the loaf a little dark. If you don't mind that, you're good to go. If you want them not quite as dark on the bottom, there are ways to avoid that, which we can talk about later. And there's also a third way, which is to bake without these. You would get a pizza stone and get a shallow baking dish that is absolutely 100% safe to be in the oven. Probably don't recommend glass for this. And you would pour water in it as you put your loaf in on the pizza stone, and that would create the steam that's created by the lid. But for now, all we're going to do is I am simply going to turn my oven on to 500, and we will simply put both of these, lid and all, into the oven. I'm gonna do both in the same oven at the same time. Often I don't do that. Often I just bake them one at a time, because what I'll do is I'll leave one loaf in the fridge and bake it the next day, because it can stay in that long. Or I'll bake them consecutively rather than at once sometimes, depending on who the loaf is going to, you know, a neighbor, a friend, whatever. We often don't eat 2 loaves at once unless we're having people over, which is often enough. So we're gonna bake them both at the same time, just so you can see the varying results of the 2 different types of baking Dutch ovens. And yeah, we'll come back. Let's go, why don't I go ahead and open these up so you can look at them. I'll just let them sit on the counter until everything is preheated. You can see bubbles. It's very, feels like like it's been inflated a little bit, which is what you want. They both are looking good. They call this the poke test, which it's supposed to spring back mostly, but not necessarily all the way, which it's so sticky. I didn't flour the top, so I can't really perform an accurate poke test, but I think it was doing it right. It sprung back, but maybe not all the way. So we'll be back in a little bit to put the loaves onto some parchment, to score them, and to bake them. See ya. Time to score our loaves and put them in the oven. I may not have mentioned this before, but the preheating of the oven at 500 with the Dutch ovens with the lid on in them is a big important step in the sourdough process. You need those pots hot, 500 degrees, and you need the lids hot as well. And that's going to create a steam environment like what you would have in a more professional oven. And it just gets you wonderful results. And that's why if you weren't going to do that, you would put a pan in the bottom, preheat the pan, put your pizza stone in the bottom or on a shelf, preheat that as well. And then what you would do is you would put your loaf on the preheated pizza stone and then simultaneously pour water into that other baking dish that's been preheated, which would create a lot of steam, which makes the crust on the bread crusty and the way you want it. And then after 20 minutes, you take that out and take the steam pan out, leave the bread in the oven. So we start at 500 degrees with our things in there. Everything's preheated. I have my loaves right here. I've cut some parchment paper. We're gonna bake these on the parchment paper. I'm gonna flip one of the loaves out. I probably won't do 2 just for time's sake. So I flipped it out, and it kind of got a little off. That's no big deal. You can see all the rice flour on there that I had put in. I'm gonna kind of spread it out because I don't want like a big hunk of flour. I want it more even. And then this is the scoring part. And the reason why we score is so that the gases can release and the bread can rise to its full potential. It will, if you don't score it, it'll break on its own, which is fine. Some people really like that. But the scoring just allows you to kind of guide how it grows, and it's also how you can choose to do a design. So here's my bread loam, and here's just a plain two-sided razor blade. These are very cheap. I buy them in bulk. I'll have this box probably for the next 20 years. It's got so many in there. But I'll just score with just the razor blade instead of the actual tool, just to show you that you don't need to buy the tool. These razor blades are like pennies, and you could just use this. So you can, this is the part that I kind of like. It's not so good that I actually have that off the parchment, so I'm gonna kind of do this. The part that I like is this scoring part. So let's just do one where I'm gonna make kind of a square or a diamond. You need to do your first, you need a few deep cuts, and it needs to work with the bread. So a lot of times people will score it kind of like this. Gotta commit, just go for it. It's a sharp, thin razor blade. Be careful, these are sharp, you could cut yourself. And then this part in the middle, I'm gonna make lesser deep cuts. And this is gonna be kind of the pretty part of the design. You could just plop it in like this. This is a more rustic look. A lot of people love this more rustic look. I personally, I like the rustic look a lot, but I really like the design part. We're just gonna do a little branchy leaf in here. And you know, how deep you go is going to determine how much they open up. I kind of go less deep on this part. I like it a little more subtle, but everybody's different. I like mine not symmetrical. Again, people are different about that. Some people's are just perfectly symmetrical, and that there's a beauty to that. I like mine a little less symmetrical. So then what we do, get your oven mitts on. Some people take their thing out and do this. I leave mine in the oven. I work fast. Open the oven up. I'm just gonna do the one. Take the lid off. You're gonna pick up your parchment. You're gonna plop it in. Don't burn yourself. And then you're just gonna put this right back on. You could cut your parchment into a round, a small round. I don't like doing that. I find it's too small. I get nervous about lifting it. Now I'm just gonna set the timer for 20 minutes. My timer is a little finicky. Oh, I got it, I nailed it. And in 20 minutes, I will take the lid off. I will turn the temp down to about 450. In my oven, I actually turn it down to more like 475. You need to work with your oven and observe your results and see what temps work best. If your oven doesn't heat very hot, you might want to start at hotter than 500. If your oven goes up to 550, maybe start there. Maybe start at 525. The point is, recipes are made for man, not man for recipes, to kind of do a little twist on the old Sabbath verse. The point being, do not be needlessly bound to the recipe. If it isn't giving you the proper results, you have permission to do what works best. So I start at 500, I go for 20 minutes, I take the lid off, and then I reduce down to about 465, 475. If you're getting a burnt result on the bottom of your bread, which I don't really get, although I hear that happens sometimes with the cast iron or the stainless steel, you can put like a cookie sheet underneath of it. When you take the lid off, you could just slip this under and that might help. Or you can take the loaf out of the Dutch oven after the 20 minutes and just bake it on right on the rack or on another thing. I don't want to do that. I think that's a little dicey. A lot of potential to get burnt, a lot of potential to kind of like drop the loaf. I'm sure there are ways to do it. I'm not gonna try that. So we'll be back in a little bit to take the lid off, and we'll show you that, and then to take the bread out. Timer's going off. It has been 20 minutes. I'm gonna take the lids off, and Evangeline will come over and show us how it looks, but don't get too close or you'll probably steam the lens. So here's the first one. You can see it has risen a lot. We're getting this is called an ear. That's good, you do want that. Now this one I put in a little bit later than the other one. I forgot about it to put it in. So it probably could use the lid on a little longer, but it's looking good. I'm just gonna put that on for a little bit more. We'll go ahead and push it in, close it up. Now the question is, should I lower it down to 475 or 450 if I'm keeping the lid on the other because I got the timing off? Well, sure, I'll lower it. But these are the kinds of things that as a home cook who's kind of has real life and is forgetful, at least I am extremely forgetful, these sorts of things happen. Don't stress, just try your best to make the bread and it'll all work out fine. We'll be back in a little bit to see them finished. Okay, here we go. The bread's done. I'm gonna take it out of the oven, turn the oven off. We've got both of them here. This is the one that I put in a little earlier. And this one needs a few more minutes, so I'll take that one out in a little bit. But you can come over and see this one that is done. It's nice and dark. This is all kind of caramelized. This is maybe a little darker than what yours may be. Just because I left it in a little longer than when the timer actually went off. But this is the finished product. Now what I'll do is I'll take it out, I'll put it on a cooling rack and wait until it cools before I cut into it. The temptation is to cut into it immediately. If you want to do that, you do that, whatever. But you want to wait because it lets the bread finish cooking on the inside. If you cut into it immediately, it'll be kind of really gummy on the inside. So I'll wait and let it cool before we cut into it. So see you soon. I wanted to take a little video of the finished products while they have just come out of the oven and they're cooling. I don't know if you can hear or if it's quiet enough in here, but the bread is crackling, which is one of my favorite parts. It comes out of the oven, it sits here, and it just makes this crackle noise as it sits and starts to cool, which is just fun. I'm going to give you a sense of kind of their height. These are nice, big, tall loaves for the most part. Also, might as well show you that it's actually hailing outside here. We got our summer table out in hope, and it's hailing, but summer will come. So there's how they look out of the oven before we cut into them in the next video. Okay, we're going to cut the bread now. It's out, it's mostly cooled, it's just slightly warm. We'll see kind of what the results are that we got. This is a very crummy process, meaning the crumbs kind of go everywhere, so get used to that. You can see the crumb looks really good. I'll do one more piece just to kind of give us a sense of how it turned out. It's very, again, I'll use the word fluffy. It's light and sort of airy. It's a really nice looking crumb. Nice tall pieces. I'll probably come back with some more tips in a separate video and resources, and